Gene Kelly sat alone in the editing room at 3 in the morning, watching the same 30 seconds of film for the 47th time. His hands were shaking. Not from exhaustion, though he hadn't slept more than 4 hours a night in 6 months. Not from the whiskey, though the bottle beside him was half empty, and it was only Tuesday. His hands shook because he had just realized something terrible. The film he had spent 3 years of his life creating. The film that had consumed every waking moment. The film that had cost him his marriage and nearly bankrupted him. Nobody wanted it. MGM had told him this in 1952. They had told him again in 1953, and 1954, and 1955. But Gene Kelly had stopped listening to what other people wanted 3 years ago. And now, in 1956, watching those 30 seconds loop endlessly on the moviola, he finally understood what that decision had cost him. The question wasn't whether the film would fail. The question was whether Gene Kelly would survive its failure. 1951. Gene Kelly was untouchable. An American in Paris had just won Best Picture. He was Hollywood's golden boy, the man who had proven that musicals could be art, that dance could tell stories words couldn't touch. MGM would give him anything. So Gene asked for everything. "I want to make a film with no dialogue," he told Arthur Freed. "Pure dance. 3 separate stories, 3 different styles, connected only by movement, ballet, modern, animation. Nothing like it has ever been done." Freed looked skeptical. "No dialogue? How do you tell the story?" "The dancing is the story. Gene, an American in Paris worked because you had dialogue, romance." Leslie Caron, "This will be bigger, this will change cinema." Freed saw the look in Gene's eyes, the obsession, the certainty. He had seen it before, right before Singin' in the Rain. Sometimes Gene's obsessions created masterpieces. How much will it cost? $500,000, maybe less. It cost $1.5 million, and 3 years. And Gene Kelly's sanity. The first problem was simple. Nobody understood what Gene was trying to do. The film was called Invitation to the Dance, and it had no stars except Gene. No dialogue, no plot in any conventional sense. Just 3 dance sequences. Circus, a story of love and jealousy performed as ballet. Ring Around the Rosie, a bracelet passing between characters in different countries. And Sinbad the Sailor, combining live action with animation. Gene tried explaining it to the crew. "We are creating pure cinema, movement as narrative. The audience won't need words, they will feel the story." The cinematographer nodded politely and thought, "This is going to be a disaster." But Gene didn't care what people thought. He had stopped caring somewhere around month 3, when MGM executives started sending memos suggesting he reconsider the concept or add some dialogue to clarify the story. Gene threw the memos away. He knew what he was doing. He had created an American in Paris, hadn't he? Singin' in the Rain? He was Gene Kelly. He didn't make mistakes. Except the filming wasn't going well. The ballet sequences required precision. Gene had never attempted. Dancers had to hit marks within centimeters. Lighting had to be perfect. Camera movements needed to flow like choreography. Again. Gene would say after take 17, "Gene, we got it." Again. Take 34, take 52, take 91. The crew started whispering, not loud enough for Gene to hear, but loud enough for each other. He has lost it. This isn't Singin' in the Rain anymore. He thinks he is making art. He is making a very expensive home movie. Gene heard the whispers, ignored them, kept filming. Year 2, the problems got worse. The animation sequence, Sinbad the Sailor, required months of coordination between Gene and animators. Gene would perform on a blue screen, then animators would paint the background, the characters, the entire world around him. It was painstaking, it was expensive, and it looked, even Gene had to admit, a little ridiculous. "We need more time," Gene told MGM. "You have had 18 months. The animation isn't right. The synchronization is off. I need another 6 months." The executives looked at each other. An American in Paris had made them millions. Singin' in the Rain was a phenomenon. If Gene Kelly said he needed 6 more months, they would give him 6 more months. But they were starting to wonder if Gene Kelly knew what he was doing anymore. So was Gene's wife, Betsy Blair. She had watched her husband disappear into this project. He came home at midnight, left at 5 a.m. He talked about nothing except camera angles and animation timing. He had lost weight, stopped smiling, snapped at their daughter Carrie when she asked him to play. "Gene," Betsy said one night, "maybe it is time to step back. Take a break. I can't. We are so close." Close to what? Gene looked at her like she had asked why the sky was blue. Close to finishing. Close to perfection. "It has been 2 years. Great art takes time," Betsy wanted to say. "This isn't great art. It is obsession." But she had learned that Gene Kelly didn't hear criticism anymore. He only heard doubt, and doubt made him work harder, push longer, demand more. So she said nothing, and watched her marriage dissolve in silence. Year 3, Gene started forgetting things. Not choreography, never choreography. But he would forget meetings, forget to eat. The crew would find him in the editing room at dawn, still wearing yesterday's clothes, looping the same sequence over and over. "Gene, you need sleep. I need to fix this transition. The movement doesn't flow. Watch, see, between beats 7 and 8, there is a half-second lag. I need to refilm it." "Gene, we filmed that sequence 9 months ago. The set doesn't exist anymore. Then rebuild it. It will cost. I don't care what it costs. Rebuild it." MGM was losing patience. The budget had exploded. $600,000, $900,000, $1.2 million, and they hadn't seen a finished frame. Executives started suggesting maybe Gene should focus on other projects, maybe put Invitation to the Dance aside, come back to it later. Gene's response was simple. "No, Gene, we are not asking." I said no. "This film will be finished. This film will be my masterpiece." The executives left behind closed doors. They started discussing what to do if Gene Kelly had a breakdown. December 1953. The breaking point came during the animation sequence. Gene was lying on the soundstage floor, had been for 6 hours, performing Sinbad the Sailor against a blue screen, while animators would later paint the world around him. His back screamed. His knees were raw from repeated takes on the hard surface. "Cut," the cinematographer called. "We got it, Gene?" "No. The arm extension on beat 16 is off by half a second." Again, the crew exchanged glances. This was take 43 of a 30-second sequence that would be covered by animation anyway. "Gene," the cinematographer tried carefully. "The animation will smooth over," I said again. The soundstage went silent. Gene Kelly didn't yell. Gene Kelly was professional, controlled, precise, but something had snapped. Gene stood slowly, body shaking. "You think I don't know what you are all saying? That I have lost it? That I am wasting everyone's time on a film nobody will ever see?" His voice cracked. "This is my vision, my proof that cinema can be more than just entertainment, and I will get it perfect even if it kills me." Nobody moved. "Again," Gene said quietly. From the top, he lay back down on the floor. The cameras rolled. Take 44. Later, the script supervisor found Gene alone in the empty soundstage at midnight, still lying on the floor, staring at the ceiling. "Mr. Kelly, we wrapped 4 hours ago." Gene didn't move. I can't remember why this mattered. I used to know, now I just can't stop. June 1954, filming wrapped. 19 months after it started. Invitation to the Dance was complete. MGM scheduled preview screenings, invited critics, industry insiders, test audiences. The reactions were catastrophic, pretentious, exhausting. Who wants to watch ballet for 90 minutes? One reviewer called Circus and Ring Around the Rosie monumental bores. Another said Gene's choreography was shallow and facile. MGM panicked. They had invested $1.4 million in a film nobody wanted. "We can't release this one," executive said flatly. "We have to," Freed argued. "Gene Kelly's name is on it. Then we will bury it. Limited release, art houses, cut our losses." Gene heard the whispers, read the internal memos, watched his dream project, the film he had spent 3 years obsessing over, the proof that dance could stand alone, get shelved indefinitely. MGM announced vaguely that release was postponed. Industry gossip said it would never see theaters. Gene went home to his wife Betsy and daughter Carrie, and pretended everything was fine. Betsy Blair knew her husband. She had been 17 when they married in 1941. Watching Gene transform from Broadway choreographer to Hollywood god, she had seen his relentless perfectionism, his inability to accept anything less than his vision, his capacity to push himself and everyone around him past breaking points. But 1954 to 1955 was different. Gene barely slept. When he did, he woke in cold sweats, talking about camera angles and choreography nobody wanted. He stopped going to parties, stopped seeing friends. At dinners, he would sit silent, mind elsewhere. "They are saying the film is a failure," he told Betsy one night. "It hasn't even been released. They are right. I made something nobody asked for. Nobody wants. I spent 19 months and over $1 million proving I am a pretentious fool. Gene, I wanted to educate audiences, show them ballet could be cinema, that dance could tell stories. Instead I made..." He stopped. "I don't even know what I made." Betsy reached for his hand, but Gene pulled away, disappeared into his study, and didn't come out until morning. Their marriage, already strained by Gene's obsessive work and Betsy's own blacklisting for leftist sympathies, began fracturing. Not loudly, not dramatically, just slowly, like ice cracking under weight. By 1957, they would be divorced. Betsy would move to Europe, never speak ill of Gene publicly, but tell friends privately. "The man I married died somewhere in England, making a film about dance." May 1956, after nearly 2 years on the shelf, MGM finally released Invitation to the Dance. Limited release, no major marketing. A quiet admission of failure. Box office, $200,000 domestic, $415,000 international. Budget, $1,419,105. Total loss, $2,523,000. MGM's biggest flop of the year. Critics were brutal. Gene's choreography, once called revolutionary, was now weak, tiresome, a gimmick. The New York Times said the film would have limited appeal. Time magazine dismissed it as Gene Kelly, at his most pretentious and least convincing. Only the Berlin Film Festival, awarding Invitation to the Dance the Golden Bear, offered validation, but even that felt hollow. A European art award for a film American audiences had rejected. Gene accepted the award graciously, gave interviews saying, "The public wasn't ready for a serious dance film." Musical popularity had declined. Professional, dignified, lying, because the truth Gene couldn't admit. Maybe the public was right. Maybe he had been wrong. Maybe 3 years of obsession had produced not a masterpiece but an indulgent vanity project that nobody except him had ever wanted. July 1956, 3 months after the film's disastrous release, Gene sat in Arthur Freed's office, the same office where, 5 years earlier, he had pitched Invitation to the Dance with absolute certainty. Freed looked older. Now, tired. "I got a call from the New York office," Freed said quietly. "They want to know if you are stable." Gene's hands tightened on the armrests. "Stable? Gene, you spent 19 months on a film that made back 14 cents on the dollar. You convinced me to fight the studio for something that nearly bankrupted your unit, and now," Freed paused, "now they are asking if I can trust you with another film. What did you tell them?" Freed met his eyes. "I told them Gene Kelly is the most talented man I have ever worked with, and that talent sometimes comes with costs. Costs. You hospitalized yourself over this film. Gene, don't think I don't know. Exhaustion is what we told the press. But I saw you, October of '55, you couldn't remember what day it was. You had lost 23 pounds. Your hands shook so badly you couldn't hold a pen." Gene said nothing. "I am not angry." Freed continued, "But I need to know. Was it worth it? 3 years of your life, your marriage, your health, for a film nobody wanted to see." Gene opened his mouth, closed it, because the honest answer, the one he couldn't say out loud, was, "I don't know. It had to be made," Gene said finally. "Did it?" Freed asked. Not cruel. Genuinely asking, or did you just need to prove you could make it? Gene stood. "Thank you for your time, Arthur." He walked out, drove home to a house that felt empty, even though Betsy and Carrie were inside, sat in his study and stared at the Golden Bear Award from Berlin, the only recognition his masterpiece had received. And Gene Kelly understood something terrible. He had sacrificed everything that mattered to create something that didn't matter to anyone except him. Late 1956, Gene Kelly, Hollywood's dancing king, found himself at a crossroads. The studio system was collapsing. Musicals were dying. Invitation to the Dance had destroyed his credibility as a solo director. MGM stopped taking his calls about new projects. His next film, Less Girls, would be his last MGM musical, a studio obligation, not a passion project. Gene started accepting straight dramatic roles, directing other people's films instead of his own visions. He had suffered a knee injury that made dancing painful. 2 strokes in the 1990s would eventually end his mobility entirely. But the real injury happened in 1956, watching his dream film die in empty theaters. Stanley Donen, Gene's former protege, who had directed 7 Brides for 7 Brothers and would go on to Charade and Funny Face, was asked once about Invitation to the Dance. Gene wanted to prove he was more than a hoofer. Stanley said, he wanted to be an artist with a capital A. The problem was, Gene Kelly was already an artist. He just couldn't see it. Clive Barnes, dance critic for the New York Times, wrote in 1977 that despite its failures, Invitation to the Dance was required watching a watershed movie that demanded to be seen, not because it succeeded, but because it tried something no one else had dared. Gene never watched the film again after 1956. When asked about it in interviews, he would give polite, distant answers. An experiment. The public wasn't ready, but Betsy, years after their divorce, told a biographer something Gene had said to her during the darkest days of 1955. I spent my whole career trying to make dance accessible to ordinary people. With this film, I forgot who I was trying to reach. I made it for myself, and it turns out I am not a very good audience. Decades later, film schools would screen Invitation to the Dance for students learning about artistic ambition versus commercial reality. They would watch Gene Kelly perform ballet in an empty circus. They would see the bracelet pass from character to character across Europe. They would marvel at the technical achievement of combining live action with hand-drawn animation, and they would discuss the cost of uncompromising vision. Some would call Gene Kelly brave. Others would call him foolish. Most would call him both, because that is what Invitation to the Dance proved, that genius and delusion live on the same street, and sometimes you can't tell which house you are entering until you are already inside. Gene Kelly made a film nobody wanted. He spent 3 years, $1.5 million, and his marriage proving that pure dance could stand alone as cinema, and he was right. It could. But could and should are different questions. The film exists. Preserved, studied, occasionally screened. A testament to what happens when an artist chooses vision over compromise, perfection over pragmatism, art over everything else. Gene Kelly spent 3 years on a film nobody wanted. It almost destroyed him, and in the end, he never knew if it was worth it.